Thank you, Ray, and hello everyone. Hopefully that intro brought back a few good memories and had you tapping your feet or your fingers. Now, nostalgia is huge right now, so hit shows like Stranger Things have us all humming tunes from the 1980s and reminiscing about the Sony Walkman and twirling tape cassettes with a pencil. If you know, you know. But why though? Psychologists have written about this as a desperate grasp for more certainty and longing for simpler times after the 2020s and COVID-19 spun us a little off track. A recent experiment showed that we have more stress chemicals flowing through us when we have a 50% chance of an unpleasant electric shock than when we have a 100% chance of that same shock. We have a deep need for certainty, and planning is rewarded with less pain. Next year is the 30-year anniversary of Friends, a show that kicked off in September 1994 and ran for a decade. Another grim milestone for us Gen Xers. What is very interesting is the longevity of the show even amongst younger generations in the 2020s. This despite some cringeworthy behavior by modern standards like Monica's regular fat shaming, for example, or Ross really struggling to deal with his son playing Barbie. Let's not forget the guys mocking Freddie Prinze Jr. as a male nanny as well. At its core though, the close ties and relationships sort of transcend the obvious dating of the show, making younger audiences more ready to accept the characters and their obvious flaws. A key part of the show's success must have been its relatable characters. Practicing psychologists have diagnosed each character's personality from observation. The personality traits of each character put forward are based on the average scores on each Big Five trait of the corresponding Myers-Briggs type indicator or MBTI personality types. This is just a fun way to explore personality archetypes and the characters most of us feel like we know quite well. But this gets interesting when we look at psychology as a predictor of behavior and how AI is already catapulting this forward. You may have already seen the 100% AI-generated Friends episode called The One with the Line, but more about this later. Let's perhaps start off with what exactly is a personality. Gordon Allport, who is the father of what is called trait theory, had over 50 definitions of personality. In general, we can think of a personality as a collection of characteristic behaviors. But these behaviors come from somewhere. They come from thought patterns or ways of making sense of the world around us. Looking at a few examples, we can quickly see how tricky this becomes. The same behaviors can be rooted in many different thought patterns and feelings. So let's say I think that if I say something, I might be wrong. This might make me feel stupid or ashamed, so in meetings, I keep quiet. The behavior is keeping quiet in meetings. The same behavior, though, can also come from thinking that if I say something, I might not have all the facts. This could make me feel guilty or disappointed if I say something prematurely. So again, I keep quiet. The first example is from a negative emotion, shame, which is a negative self-evaluation. The latter example is from a more positive emotion, being guilt, being conscious of our behavior on others. Both behaviors are the same, the underlying thought patterns, though, are different. Think about financial behavior as well. Our thoughts about money also dictate our money behaviors. You may think that if you overspend now, you'll make it up later. This makes you feel comfortable and more secure, and so perhaps impulse spend on credit now. These collections of thought patterns are not unique to any one of us, and Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung proposed this idea of a collective unconscious, or archetypes, which are common patterns of thoughts leading to common behaviors. This has evolved to what is now the most widely applied form of personality trait theory, being the Big Five. Before we get to each of the characters of Friends, let's quickly review what each of these personality traits tell us about any person. We each have all of these traits to a greater or lesser degree, and combinations lead to patterns of behavior that we can think of as an archetype or character. The characters of Friends tend to measure on the extreme ends of some of these traits, which contributes a lot, I guess, to the comedy. To help you remember all the traits, think of the acronym OCEAN. To start off, O refers to being open to experiences or broad-minded. This refers to how open you are to information. Do you actively seek it out? Are you curious? Do you love getting a new book for a gift or learning a new skill? Do you love trying out new things, or do you reject new information? Look at your music playlists. Are you still listening to the same stuff you did 20 years ago? This means you're probably more traditional, you love Christmas and birthdays, and the meaning behind these traditions and values. Next we have C. This represents conscientiousness. This determines if your thoughts are more directed to the present or to the future. When you park, do you go in frontwards, which is easier now, or backwards, easier later when you exit in the future? The kids who left the marshmallow on the table, waiting for the second, developed techniques quickly to help them focus on the future. Some covered the marshmallow or turned away from the sight or smell, focusing on the corner of the room. Others stuffed the marshmallow into their mouths before the instructor could even explain the game. They preferred the present to the future. Having high levels of C means you're a planner, and so you like rules and order, and you think of consequences. If not, you're probably more relaxed, and the future doesn't stress you out. What will be, right? Next we have the E, for extroversion. Are you the life of the party? Do you experience emotions more intensely, and do you enjoy being the center of attention? Or do you overly expressive or emotive people stress you out maybe? Do you hate making small talk and prefer a night in over a night out? Low scores on E mean you're an introvert. You find constant contact with people draining and need time alone to build your reserves again. You also don't feel emotion as intensely. Next we have A, or agreeableness. This refers to how relatable you are. Do you embrace conflict or prefer to avoid it in favor of harmony? Do you enjoy making others happy? Do you care for and show interest in others and have high levels of empathy? Or do you think it's okay to manipulate others to get what you want? How quickly do you resort to belittling others in a conflict setting, for example? This would mean low levels of A. Finally, we have the N, which is for neuroticism. Imagine you've just left the house for a 2-week holiday to the coast. About 20 minutes in, if you're hysterical with worry about whether you left the oven on or the back door open for the pet sitter, you're probably scoring higher on the N. This refers to a higher than average anxiety and mood shifts, whereas the opposite refers to being more emotionally stable. This is an important distinction. The N refers to the extent we feel negative emotions. Biologically activating the fight or flight more often releases the stress chemical cortisol into our bloodstream that is detrimental to our long-term health. However, neuroticism can also be positive in that it often also triggers nurturing behavior, for example. Monica was the mom or nurturer of the friends group. She was a good example of the positive as well as negative effects of the neuroticism trait. She was hyper-competitive, constantly needing to win to get self-affirmation. Of course, she also battled with her self-image, not really helping by the constant reminders of her childhood. Her nurturing behavior is a nice balance to what could easily have been an overbearing character. She would have scored very highly on the C, being the neatest friend of all, and also very ordered and looking to control her surroundings. Borderline OCD, in fact. The quote on your screens refers to her new standard of cleanliness being Monica clean. Of course, you could forget Monica's season 5 quote when the group is about to play the game Mad Libs, where she excitedly yells that rules help control fun, which quickly sucks the energy from the room. Lastly, Monica's low score on the O, or openness, is confirmed by her being highly traditional and a big fan of Thanksgiving holidays, and of course, being a fan of routine as well. Next, we have Rachel, probably defined by being emotional, impulsive, and undecided. This is rooted in her high score on extroversion and low score on conscientiousness. When she flew to London to tell Ross she loved him when he was marrying Emily, she wasn't thinking about the consequences of her actions. She ended up only wishing him luck, but of course this caused Ross to flub his vows, calling Emily Rachel. Yikes. People scoring very low on C often don't think about the consequences of their actions, making them more living in the moment or impulsive people. We all have those friends that travel and don't even book places to stay. They enjoy the thought of an unplanned trip. I couldn't think of anything more stressful. Rachel's high extroversion made her very social, but also very emotional. The intensity saw Rachel often going from laughter or being totally composed to tears in a matter of seconds. This is a trait that manifests in extroverts who tend to feel emotions more intensely. These are people who follow their hearts and not their heads and tend to be quite sensitive as well. Finally, we can all agree that Rachel was also the expert related to other people. She was highly agreeable, being warm and considerate, and was the girl next door character that audiences quickly fell in love with. This is an important feature of the show where some of the other characters are a bit of an acquired taste initially. This leads us neatly to the onion that was Phoebe. Colourfully described as she fits right out. Phoebe's defining characteristic was her O, or openness. This is an interesting one because it manifests differently in two different characters on the same show. Being open to new information, ideas, and philosophies makes her creative and non-conforming. Her wardrobe was a little out there, and of course there was the Smelly Cat song. Phoebe was an artist and dreamer, and happy to stay that way. She never wanted to be anything more than a masseuse because that gave her enough to enjoy what she did. Phoebe was also known for her sharp one-liners, like, "Come on Ross, you're a paleontologist, dig a little deeper." Humor and particularly sarcasm stem from the O, and we'll come back to this one shortly. Phoebe was also defined by scoring low on the C. She was more easily distracted and didn't really have one big goal, but ended up being sidetracked by lots of shorter-term goals. She was more present-orientated. Finally, Phoebe was definitely spontaneous and always up for a good time, something that came with her high levels of extroversion. She was usually the friend that was trying to lift the spirits of the group. And this brings us to Ross. Who could forget unagi, which is actually a freshwater eel, but what Ross confuses for uranagi, which is actually a judo move and not a state of mind. The point is Ross was a bit of a know-it-all, often volunteering unwanted information to the group. Ross was voted the least favorite member of the Friends group by the American public, and this was one of the reasons. People don't like those who position themselves as superior. Ross is the only introvert of the group and wants to relate to others, but does so by giving information, making him a little awkward. He struggles to relate sometimes to the group, his students, women, but that doesn't mean he doesn't want to. But when you scratch the surface, he's actually the most loyal of the group and quite submissive in his relationships, desperately seeking harmony. This makes him score highly on the A, being very agreeable by nature. This also causes him to completely miss, or rather deny, the fact that his first wife was gay, living in the hope that all the signs meant something else. Ross gets quite down on himself for this and also showing he's an internal locus of control. He's constantly looking for his own role in his failed relationships, where extroverts find it easy to shrug this off to the other party's weakness or just the way the world works. Ross is more introspective. His curiosity that contributes to him being a know-it-all and also his success as an academic point to mid-levels of O and C, respectively. This brings us to America's favorite friend, Joey. The hypertypical male character that loved food but wouldn't share it. He didn't like new ideas. He was highly traditional, scoring very low on the O, or openness. His equally low levels of conscientiousness contributed to him being extremely casual and relaxed in life. Joey is also renowned for speaking first and thinking later. Joey has off-the-charts levels of extroversion, giving him extreme confidence, in fact, overconfidence. In the episode, the one where Chandler doesn't like dogs, Rachel debates whether to make a move on her assistant. Joey tells her to go for it and then confidently states, "If it doesn't like you, this is all a moo point. It's like a cow's opinion. Doesn't matter, it's moo." Joey was also a terrible actor, but his overconfidence drives him forward in the singular goal until he eventually becomes successful as the soap opera character Drake Ramore. The second least favorite character on the show from Americans was Chandler. Interestingly, Chandler was voted the favorite character in the UK, followed by Ross. This shows the different takes on humor from the two countries, the UK preferring sarcasm and irony and a drier sense of humor. Chandler scores quite lowly on the A. He's more argumentative and skeptical, traits that make him less relatable to most people. He would score very highly though on C, being goal-oriented and highly logical. He's the most successful member of the group. His exact job was kept deliberately vague for the term of the show, and of course, Rachel and Monica lost the wager and their apartment when Rachel incorrectly identifies Chandler's job as the transponster, which soon became slang for a poorly defined role or where someone really struggles to describe their job to friends and family. I'm sure we all know a transponster or two. The personality traits associated with being witty or sarcastic are quite interesting. The first is intelligence. The personality trait of O, which Chandler would score highly on, is correlated with IQ. Simply put, people who are curious and actively seek out new information also have a deep desire to explore complexity and unconventional ideas. When combined with a low level of A, or agreeableness, or not being afraid to offend someone, you have the perfect cocktail for sarcasm. In the famous tanning mishap where Ross overexposes himself to a spray tan and turns a little orange, he tells Chandler that he visited the place that Monica suggested. Chandler quickly responds, "Was that place the sun?" The question is, do these personality traits or archetypes relate to attitudes and behavior with money? Once again, the way we think about money or our attitude is going to result in feelings that will drive our money behaviors, like spending or saving. The foundations of money attitudes were studied by Yamauchi and Templar in the early 1980s. I'll chat about 4 of the consistent money attitudes here that are also quite easy to relate to the money behaviors of the Friends characters. From left to right, we start off with money quality. We can see 2 clear opposing attitudes here. Ross gets pleasure from the quality of goods he buys. If we look at his apartment, it's the most modern and also full of art. He enjoys a good glass of wine as well. This is diametrically opposite to Phoebe, who doesn't get this utility and so won't spend her money on such things. This is linked to O, or openness. We need to dive deeper into the sub-dimensions of this trait, which is a session on its own. Suffice to say that O manifests in different ways. For Phoebe, it's all about creativity and imagination, but for Ross, it's more about understanding how stuff works. Next, we have the strongest link between personality and money, being money prudence. The best money behaviors in the show belong to Chandler, who always has savings to lend to Joey and even to Monica as they plan for their wedding, followed by Ross. The worst belong to Joey, always borrowing money, and Rachel, who impulse spends for psychological comfort, initially at least. Next, we have money prestige, with 2 opposites once more. The first chance Joey gets when he lands the Days of Our Lives gig is to buy a ton of expensive items to show everyone he's made it. This represents the good life to Joey and what he's been working for. On the opposite side of the spectrum is Phoebe, who is unimpressed by money. This represents a low money prestige. In the final season, she decides to donate her wedding funds to a children's charity, for example. Finally, there's money anxiety. This represents the degree to which money is a source of anxiety and worry. The show starts off with Rachel getting cut off by her rich father, and money quickly becomes a source of anxiety for Rachel, but also a main driver of her becoming independent. Monica's money behavior in the show is the anomaly. One would expect someone who isn't spontaneous and who is highly ordered or has high levels of C to be a natural saver. Even her father advises her to save 10% of any income for a rainy day, but she never does. Perhaps a good example that we should never assume that people who have the right factory settings to save always do so and so don't need help. This brings us to the end of the psychology piece and to the realm of AI. There is already a 100% AI-generated episode of Friends called The One with the Line. We mentioned that earlier at the start. Characters still look like Sims characters, so highly pixelated and animated, but that's not the eerie part. About 5 years ago, a few AI-generated scripts emerged. One popped up called The One About the Chimney Shoes. Some of the lines were hysterical. Oddly enough, Phoebe's lines kind of sounded normal against some of the stuff she usually said on the actual show, but here are a few examples. Joey winks at the water knowingly and gives a sexy nod. So basically, Joey makes a pass at his glass of water. Ross was heartbroken right before getting Thanos snapped. What a way to go. The AI clearly thought that the Avengers actually happened and that this stuff actually happened. Now an interaction between Rachel and Phoebe. Phoebe: I don't want a sexy guy, I just want a guy who likes knitting. Rachel: didn't No Ears Mark like to do that? Phoebe: I just want a guy who likes knitting and has at least one ear. Kind of sounds like Phoebe, right? In the 2019 Emotion X Challenge, developers were given the task to train an AI to classify emotion behind each line of Friends' dialogue. How they did this was to set up a human panel initially who would then vote on each sentence in every episode and classify the underlying emotion as joy, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, disgust, or indeed being neutral. The majority vote of the human panel was accepted and then used to train an AI to predict the emotion behind language. One of the groups who attempted the challenge managed to get an F score or model accuracy metric of just over 80%, which is a very, very good starting point. Flash forward to the episode using GPT-4, and the dialogue makes perfect sense, but also the intonation behind the dialogue that gives us clues into emotions of the character are clearer. We've come a long way in a few months. Let's quickly take a look at the short clip of the AI-generated episode.
Guys, you won't believe what I have to do today.
What's going on, Chandler?
Will asked me to take care of his pet lion for a day. A lion? You know how I feel about lions, right?
Will has a pet lion? That's so irresponsible.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Can we go see it?
No, Rachel, we cannot go see it. I'm terrified.
Chandler, it's okay. I'm sure Will wouldn't have asked you if it wasn't safe.
Yeah, because Will is the picture of responsible pet ownership. A lion, Phoebe. What do I do if it gets hungry or wants to play fetch with my head?
You guys, I have a bigger problem here. I just found out that Rachel used my new credit card without asking me.
I was going to tell you, Monica, I just needed to buy a few things. I'll pay you back, I promise.
A few things. Rachel, you spent $300 on shoes.
Well, that's nothing compared to the medical bills I'll have after being mauled by a lion.
Just stay calm and maybe try bonding with the lion. You know, like getting to know its interests, favorite snacks and stuff.
Oh, yeah, because I'm sure it just loves talking about the latest episode of The Bachelor over a plate of antelope tartare.
I'm really sorry, Monica. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I'll find a way to pay you back.
Fine, but you're going to have to cut back on your shopping for a while.
Can we please get back to my life-threatening problem here?
Chandler, I'll go with you and help you take care of the lion. We'll make it through this together. Besides, if the lion tries anything, I know a few self-defense moves.
Thanks, Phoebe. You're a lifesaver, literally.
They even managed to capture a little of the personalities behind the characters we know so well. Here we also see just how important and indeed difficult it will be to incorporate the secret sauce that is comedic timing. But we're only a few months into GPT-4 and these are already some impressive results. On your screens, you'll also see some AI-generated images that have generated hundreds of thousands of interactions and comments online. The left presents what the characters would have looked like if the show originated in India, and the right represents cast members as super cute kids. The improved understanding of context and emotion in language is already enabling AI to auto-assess the underlying personality traits we've talked about earlier from social media data. Rory Sutherland of Ogilvy and founder of their behavioral science unit is of the view that we're focusing too much on technology breakthroughs to improve humanity where psychology is often the answer and indeed right in front of us. He gives the example of Uber's success primarily as being that little map on the screen telling us where our driver is. This map creates highly desired human and indeed biological need of certainty we spoke about earlier. Where is my driver and how long must I wait? What's been around in subways for over a decade, the countdown timer showing how many seconds until the train arrives, was now available to everyone on an app. At Momentum Investments, we're approaching behavioral change from both sides, technology and psychology. We've identified 4 behavioral tracks or targeted behaviors we believe are important to investor success. One of these is the stay invested behavior that cost South African investors over 650 million rand or $36 million in behavior tax or lower investment returns during COVID from leaving risky assets after the crash and then buying back in when markets had recovered and in fact exceeded pre-crash levels. We've used machine learning to analyze a massive data set of investor behavior to show what the general structure or behavior patterns were. The 4 patterns of behavior which stand out clearly are on the left of your screens. Some investors do what others do. They try and time markets and are greedy when others are greedy and fearful when others are fearful. The assertive investors love chasing past performance and drive using the rearview mirror in essence. They persist in switching their investments to last year's winners. The anxious investor doesn't mind taking risk, but at the first sign of turbulence, they move their money back to cash. Finally, the avoider, by contrast, stays away from risk in general, sitting on the sidelines for extended periods and watching booms and busts, but also erosion of their capital from inflation. While these algorithms give us a clear structure, they don't have much predictive power. To do this, we're using supervised machine learning techniques like the random forest technique, for example. The technique is called a forest because it's made up of many decision trees. Multiple samples are drawn from a large data set of over 12 million switch transactions and a model trained on various sample data sets to predict the likelihood that an investor will switch, say, in the next 3 months. This gives advisors enough time for intervention. These models are highly sensitive to the variables being used, and on the right of the screen we can see some big 5 variables we've discussed today. With the Momentum Investments Money Fingerprint, which is our psychometric assessment of some of the money attitudes and personality traits we've seen today, We use these as inputs to the prediction engine that ultimately will help us to help investors stay invested. The low-hanging fruit of GPT and AI is undoubtedly natural language processing, where using decades of documented human interaction, like from sitcoms and TV series, will help train AI to give a personality diagnosis from your Twitter or X or indeed Threads feeds together with other accounts like Facebook, LinkedIn, or even some of your blogs. This will mean more and more you're going to start getting hyper-personalized engagements tailored specifically to your personality and likely when you need to hear that message the most. Thank you all very much.